Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 17th installment of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links Best Deck series. Today, I'm going to be showing you a control deck based around Guardian Statue and Clowns. So a couple of things before the video starts. First of all, you will notice that I have a Clown deck already on my channel, but that deck is vastly different to this one. This one's kind of an update, I guess, to that Clown deck, but the deck lists are very different. There's very little similarities. And the second thing is, if you're wondering how I'm going in the World Championship qualifier thing, currently I'm Plat 3, trying to get the 5-win streak for King of Games, and real triggered about it. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so the best character for this deck is anyone, as the skill that is best for this is universal. The best skill for this deck is balance. Your starting hand will reflect the card balance of your deck, which means if you have 10 spells and traps and 10 monsters, your starting hand will be 2 monsters and 2 spells / traps. I believe this one is currently the best skill since Switcheroo is no longer a viable ability as it was nerfed, as this deck relies heavily on having spells to go with its monster cards. If you just have monster cards or you just have spell cards, you're just going to lose at the start. So using this skill allows you to have a good balanced starting hand. Alright, now let's go through the deck list. The deck list is 3 Guardian Statues, 3 Dream Clowns, 2 Sphere Kuriboh, 2 4-star Ladybug of Doom, 2 Enemy Controller, 2 Interdimensional Matter Transporter, 2 Desert Sunlight, 1 Half Shot, 1 Mirror Wall, 1 Windstorm of Etaqua, and 1 Curse of Anubis. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is this deck looks a little bit messy. There's a lot of 1-ofs, there's a lot of 2-ofs, there's not many 3-ofs, so it looks kind of inconsistent. But there is a reason for this. Curse of Anubis and Windstorm of Etaqua, for starters, they can only be 1-ofs because you can only get one of them in the game. And secondly, there's a lot of situations where cards are better in than others. So the reason there is lots of 2-ofs is because some cards are simply just better into matchups than others. So rather than specifically focusing on one matchup, it's better to have a variety to cover all the matchups. That's how I found it anyway. If you don't have any of the cards in this deck, like you're missing a few of the cards, you can always just swap in like a 3rd Enemy Controller, or a 3rd 12-star Ladybug of Doom, a 3rd Sphere Kuriboh, a 3rd Interdimensional Matter Transporter, 2nd Mirror Wall, 2nd Half Shot, 3rd Desert Sunlight. There's plenty of ways you can modify the deck if you want to make it more consistent towards specific matchups, but I think this one is the best list for overall purposes. Because another thing you'll find is that Half Shot and Mirror Wall, or Enemy Controller and Sphere Kuriboh, they both perform the exact same purpose in the deck, which is just to defend the monsters. So having 1-ofs of each of them provides kind of a wider spectrum in ways of defending matchups rather than just having just mirror walls or just half shots. Right, so the strategy for this deck is fairly simple. You've got 2 monsters that are very important, your Dream Clowns and your Guardian Statues. What Dream Clown does is when its battle position is changed from attack to defense, it can destroy an enemy monster. And what Guardian Statue does is once per turn you can flip it to face down defense position, and when it's flipped from face down defense position to face up, it does pretty much the same as Dream Clown, except it doesn't destroy the monster, it just returns it to their hand. So the whole idea is to keep changing the battle positions of these 2 monsters. So you have a few cards in the deck that allow you to assist you in changing the battle positions of these monsters, such as Desert Sunlight, which are there to be used during your opponent's turn, to make your opponent not be able to play any cards, therefore leaving his life points always open, to be hit by things such as Dream Clown or your Guardian Statues. And because the deck is so reliant on these 2 monsters being kept alive as their attack and defense is rather low, the rest of the deck is based around defending them. So, Enemy Controllers, Interdimensional Matter Transporters, both are used to protect the monsters from battle and protect the monsters from other sources such as order to charge and all those kind of things. If you still don't quite understand how this deck works, don't worry, at the end of the video I'll have gameplay that just shows it off, a brief rundown of what it does. Alright, now I'll go through each of the monster cards individually and each of the spell and trap cards individually to get more of an idea of what each of the cards' purposes and kind of what they're there for. Alright, so the monster cards in this deck are 4-star Ladybug of Doom, Dream Clown, Guardian Statue, and Sphere Kuriboh. 4-star Ladybug of Doom is kind of there as your turn 1 play. What I mean by that is, if you happen to be going second, having a 4-star Ladybug kind of can help reset the board a bit, because it's a lot easier to defend your Dream Clowns and your Guardian Statues from one monster that your opponent has played rather than if they have played two, because they'll have their turn 1 monster that they play and they'll have their turn 2 monster that they'll play, so you have to defend from 2 rather than defending from just 1, which 4-star Ladybug can kind of reset the board a bit to make it a bit easier for you. Also, obviously, the meta is filled with a ton of 4-star monsters. The exception to this is probably the Harpy decks, which are all 3-star monsters, but even they have quite a few 4-star. So, what 4-star Ladybug of Doom does is, once it's flipped, it destroys all level 4 monsters your opponent controls. So this card can be very, very strong, especially in the early stages of the game. The next two cards are obviously Dream Clown and Guardian Statue. Not really much to say about them, as I've already spoke about them. They are what the deck's built around. Basically, Dream Clown is extremely easy to use, and it's your big hard hitter to do damage to your opponent's life points. Probably the only thing I have to say is about Guardian Statue, which is, once it's face up on the board, you can activate its ability, and it will go back to face down defense position, and on the same turn you can then change it to attack position again. So, they're very easy to use, very easy to learn, not really much to say about them. And the final monster card in this deck is Sphere Kuriboh, which it's very obvious what it's here for. When your opponent swings at you, you can activate its ability when it's in your hand, and it will change your opponent's monster's battle position, therefore defending your Dream Clowns and your Guardian Statues from being attacked. Which I'm going to say this for all 3 of these cards. If you don't have a Sphere Kuriboh, but you have a Windstorm of Etaqua or enemy controller, feel free to put one in instead of the Sphere Kuriboh. Same goes to the other 2 cards, the enemy controller and the Windstorm of Etaqua. If you don't have either of them, you can just put an extra Sphere Kuriboh or an extra enemy controller, because they're all perform the exact same purpose. Obviously it's better to have a bit of variety, as they do have slight differences in them, but if you don't have one or the other, each of those 3 cards do the same purpose, so you can swap one in instead. Alright, now I'll go through the spells and traps. The spells and traps in this deck are Desert Sunlight, Curse of Anubis, Windstorm of Etaqua, Enemy Controller, Half Shut, Interdimensional Matter Transporter, and Mirror Wall. So the first 2 cards in this deck are the cards you'll use to change your monster's battle position, to assist in using their ability. These 2 cards will be used during your opponent's turn, not during your turn, as during your turn you can change their battle position manually, so you don't need to use these cards. What Desert Sunlight does is it changes all monsters on your side of the field to defense position, face up defense position, so you can use it on your face down Guardian Statue, for example, to flip it face up. Curse of Anubis is very similar, change all effect monsters on the field to defense position until the end turn their defense is set to 0, and their battle positions cannot be changed. The major difference between these 2 cards is Curse of Anubis changes all monsters on the board, that includes your opponent's monsters, so it can also be used to just protect them from battle, for example. But it does also change your monsters to defense position, so it can proc their abilities, and it can also be used to protect them. Windstorm of Etaqua is fairly similar to Curse of Anubis in the second function of the card, which is simply it can change all monsters your opponent controls battle positions. So if all 3 of his monsters are on the board, they all want to attack you, you can activate this card, they all get changed to defense position, and they no longer can. So this card is very strong when your opponent's got a full board, a lot stronger than enemy controller and Sphere Kuriboh, but it still performs the same purpose of changing your opponent's battle positions when they go to attack you. And obviously the big difference between Windstorm and Curse of Anubis is Windstorm works on all monsters your opponents control that are face up, and Curse of Anubis only works on the effect monsters, so normal monsters stay safe. Enemy controller is in here for two purposes. The main one is to be used pretty much as a sphere Kuriboh. When your opponent attacks you, activate it, change them to defense position. But it also has the second bonus of you can tribute one of your monsters to take control of one of your opponent's monsters to be able to finish a game. What I mean by this is if you have two monsters on your board and you cannot get through your opponent's monster because it has a too much higher stat power and you're not able to change the battle positions of your monsters to try and kill it or return it to his hand, you can activate a Sphere Kuriboh, destroy one of your two monsters, take control of their big monster, and then use it with your other little things, or little monsters, to hit your opponent's life points. So it does have that kind of added bonus attached to it. You will be using it more to just change your opponent's to defense position, but it does have that extra little bonus if you need it. Half Shot is very similar to Windstorm of Etaqua in a way, in that it can defend your monster for up to all of the attacks that your opponent has in store for it. What it does is it targets one monster on the field, it cannot be destroyed by battle, and its attack is halved. So the fact that it cannot be destroyed by battle is the main purpose of this card. You can activate your Half Shot on any of your two monsters, and they can no longer be destroyed, so therefore you can use them next turn to change their battle position and continue controlling your opponent's board. Interdimensional Matter Transporter is in here purely to defend your monster cards against traps and spells. More specifically cards like Order to Charge, which are very common at the moment. What they do is they destroy a monster you control, and what Interdimensional Matter Transporter does is it targets a face-up monster you control and banishes it until the end phase. So when your opponent activates an Order to Charge, targets your monster, you can just banish it, and on your turn it comes back again, therefore being able to use it again to control your opponent's board. Interdimensional Matter Transporter can be used in another way. It can also be used to defend your monsters from battle, so if your opponent attacks them, you can banish them instead, so they can't be killed. But if you do that, your opponent can then swing at your life points. So it's better to use a Sphere Kuriboh in that situation, or an enemy controller. But if you don't have one, Interdimensional Matter Transporter can work as well. Mirror Wall's in here, purely to defend your monsters. Very self-explanatory. I'm sure you guys have all seen this card as it's very popular as well in the meta. When your opponent attacks you, each of your opponent's monsters that conduct an attack while this card is face up on the field has their attack halved. So if they attack into your class clown, for example, their attack will be halved, and they'll take battle damage, and your class clown won't. So it can also be used to get a bit of chip damage into your opponent's life points, but mostly it's just there to defend against your opponent attacking you. The one downside to Mirror Wall in this deck specifically is with your Guardian statue. When your Guardian statue is in attack position, Mirror Wall can only defend it for up to 1600 attack, as your Guardian statue's attack is only 800. So that's kind of a weakness to Mirror Wall, and probably why there's only one of them in the deck. But generally, it will be able to defend your monsters very effectively. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for this deck. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Don't forget to like, subscribe and all that shit. Also, if you don't understand anything about the deck, there is gameplay at the end of the video if you'd like to watch that to try and get a better understanding. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.